The Inquisition merely performs the duty of its office. To further fear them is redundant, to hate them, heretical. Those more sensible will place responsibility with those who force their hands.
The Inquisition, formerly called the Holy Orders of the Emperor's Inquisition, is a secret organization that exists outside of the standard administrative hierarchy of the Imperium of Man. The Inquisition acts as the secret police force and primary intelligence service of the Imperium, hunting down any and all of the myriad threats to the stability of the God Emperor's realm, from the corruption caused by the forces of chaos, heretics, mutants, and rebels, to assaults from vicious alien species like the Tyranids, Orcs, or Drukhari. Although many Inquisitors consider themselves answerable only to the High Lords of Terra and the Emperor himself, in reality there exists a class of high-echelon Imperial servants to which Inquisitors belong, who all wield more or less the same levels of de facto political influence. Such worthies include Imperial Planetary Governors and Sector Lords, Astra Militarum Generals, Space Marine Chapter Masters, Ecclesiarchy Cardinals, Rogue Traders, Adeptus Mechanicus Archmagi, Navis Imperialis Lord Admirals, Adeptus Arbites Judges, and the sector-level representatives of the Adeptus Administratum. Relations between these various groups are often seething with internecine rivalry and bitterness, and even within one grouping deadly wars may be fought to gain influence and leverage. Imperial commanders, for example, quite frequently engage in bitter and bloody territorial clashes between each other's fiefs, and the Inquisition is far from immune to internal strife. The Inquisition's infamous sigil was derived from the personal heraldry of Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra during the Great Crusade, and the Horus Heresy, and the second most powerful psyker in the Imperium after the Emperor of Mankind himself. It was Malcador who first created the secret organization that would later become the varied Ordos of the Inquisition at the start of the heresy on the orders of the Emperor. The Master of Mankind had ordered the Sigillite to find a group of men and women of an inquisitive nature to search out the enemies of the Imperium, whether they lay within or without. The Inquisition is divided into three major orders, or Ordos Majoris in High Gothic, and many other minor ones, or Ordos Minoris, each dedicated to confronting a very specific threat to the continued survival of the Imperium and humanity. The Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus and their Chamber Militant, the Space Marines of the Grey Knights, seek to confront and defeat the forces of chaos and the other threats from beyond wherever they assault Imperial space. The Ordo Xenos and its Chamber Militant, the Astartes of the Death Watch, defend the Imperium from the myriad alien threats that lie outside its borders. The Ordo Hereticus and its Chamber Militant, the pious battle sisters of the Adepta Sororitas Orders Militant, seek to combat all of the very human threats to the Imperium that lie within its organizations or on its worlds. In the 41st millennium, the Inquisition is the most powerful organization of the Imperium's many branches. Its agents, the Inquisitors, command fear and respect in equal measure. They are creatures of myth as much of flesh and blood, relentless beings who descend from on high to pass judgment upon the mutant, the traitor, and the heretic. It is a rare Imperial citizen who does not dread drawing an Inquisitor's steely gaze, who does not experience the starkest terror in his or her presence. Every Imperial citizen, from the poorest of underhive scum to the highest and wealthiest of nobles, has heard the tales of death and destruction, of the all-seeing eye that condemns or absolves with impunity. Those who have crossed an Inquisitor's path and survived to tell of it are seldom eager to invite their attention again. Inquisitors are as varied in appearance and manner as the myriad threats they face. They range in age from fiery young zealots to hoary old veterans who have fought in the darkness for Terran centuries. Some wear ostentatious robes and symbols of their allegiance, whilst others shun the trappings of status. Inquisitors commonly carry a wide range of weapons and war gear so as to be prepared for any threat they might face. Some Inquisitors use outlandish weaponry taken from defeated foes, exotic hardware, alien guns, and demon-possessed weapons. Inquisitors themselves care little for morality, and nothing at all for the Imperium's many laws and procedures except when they choose to make use of them. They are the Emperor's left hand as the Adeptus Terra is his right, and stand in judgment over all the Imperium's organizations and citizens. Indeed, an Inquisitor is apart from the rest of mankind in every way that matters. By ancient tradition, their authority comes directly from the Emperor himself. There is no hierarchy to which they must answer, and they are beholden only to their fellows. More than this, a bearer of the Inquisitorial Seal can requisition any servant in the Imperium to assist in their mission, from the lowliest of clerks to entire Space Marine chapters and Imperial Navy battle fleets. Survival is the only goal for which Inquisitors strive, not personal survival, for they, more than any, understand that one life is meaningless when set upon the galactic scale. An Inquisitor labors for nothing less than the endurance and continued survival of humanity. This is a cold-hearted pragmatism, so unyielding and fervid that it eclipses the faith of even the most devout of the ecclesiarchy's adepts. The Inquisitor is an arbiter of absolute truth. In his or her eyes, tradition is irrelevant. Solar decades of blameless existence count for nothing, and ignorance matters not one whit. The deeds of the hour are the Inquisitor's obsession, and the consequences spiraling from the most seemingly insignificant acts their burden. Though learned, Inquisitors do not possess some all-encompassing store of knowledge and certainty, for even the furthest traveled and most experienced of their number hold but a fraction of the Emperor's wisdom. Though there are many thousands of Inquisitors scattered across the Imperium, such are the threats arrayed against mankind that 10 times their number could not hope to achieve lasting victory or even meaningful respite. Demons clamor beyond the Emperor's light, waiting for the hour in which the darkness drowns all. Aliens crowd close, subverting and destroying whole worlds. And all the while, the willful, the foolish, the misguided, and the arrogant within humanity's own ranks unknowingly work towards their own destruction. All of these threats must be opposed and contained by whatever means are necessary, and only Inquisitors have the breadth of vision and authority to do so. Where a planetary governor or imperial military commander might perceive only an insurrection to be crushed, an Inquisitor will recognize the heresy of which that rebellion is but a symptom. They will have the contacts and resources to root out alien conspiracies, bureaucratic corruption, and even the gene seed deviances festering within hitherto blameless Space Marine chapters. If perspicacious enough, an Inquisitor will be able to detect incipient disaster through analysis or instinct, excising the cancer before it takes root, whether in person or through the scalpel of the Officio Assassinorum. Too often, however, their efforts are expended on a cataclysm already begun, one which can only be ended by the sledgehammer of the Astra Militarum or the horror of Exterminatus. There are no lengths to which an Inquisitor will not go in pursuit of their duty, no sanction too extreme. They know that it is better for 1 billion blameless souls to perish alongside a single guilty fugitive if it ensures the threat to the rest of mankind is ended. Most Inquisitors grieve for the murder they wreak in survival's cause. They mourn every death and forge on only through the knowledge that the act served a greater purpose. Others have become so emotionally cauterized by the constant strife that they give the matter no more thought than they would when sweeping the pieces from a gaming board. Yet there are occasionally acts of mercy to balance those of murder. Most Inquisitors are not blind to the possibility of redemption. Virtue in the present can sometimes outweigh the evils of the past, though such reprieves are rare indeed. Lesser men might believe that the means matter more than the end, but those who bear the Inquisitorial Seal know better. Perhaps in another time, another place, the men and women of the Inquisition would be considered as monstrous as the threats they oppose, but to judge them as such is to willfully overlook a brutal truth. Morality and compassion are luxuries that the Imperium can ill afford in the 41st millennium. Steeped in atrocity though they may be, Inquisitors are often the heroes their grim times require. It should come as no surprise that the Inquisition's past is shrouded in secrecy. Even the Inquisitors themselves have only the haziest of understandings as to how their organization was founded and must rely on hundreds of disparate and contradictory legends for guidance. Indeed, there is a branch of the Inquisition itself, the Ordo Originatus, dedicated to unraveling 10 millennia of myths, exaggerations, and lies. This is a difficult task, raised to impossibility due to the opposing work of the Ordo Redactus, who focus their own efforts into deliberately obscuring the past, lest the enemies of mankind discover some advantage through knowledge of the Inquisition's beginnings. What almost all the legends agree on, however, is that the Inquisition is widely believed to have been formed by Malcador the Sigillite, by the order of the Emperor of Mankind during the final days of the Horus Heresy. As the story goes, Malcador, the Regent of Terra, was charged by the Emperor immediately after news had reached Terra of the War Master Horus's betrayal during the massacre of the loyalist Astartes on Istvan III, to gather a group of dedicated imperial servants whose loyalty, courage, and strength of mind was unquestioned. Malcador initially chose 12 persons of an inquisitive nature, 8 loyal Space Marines taken from all of the Space Marine legions, and 4 mortal Imperial Lords and Administrators, who would respectively become the initial core of the Grey Knights and the Conclaves of the Inquisition. They were presented by Malcador to the Emperor at the Imperial Palace after being brought secretly through enemy lines during the Siege of Terra, the final campaign of the heresy. These were individuals of unblemished loyalty, determination, and strength of mind, who would serve the Emperor well in the years to come. Beyond that one story, the legends diverge, ascribing numerous identities to each of the 12, some ludicrous, many credible, and all utterly unprovable. Yet the foundations of the Inquisition were created from the 4 mortal lords and administrators of the Imperium chosen by Malcador, while the Grey Knights, the first and most effective of the Inquisition's chambers militant, were forged from the 8 loyalist Astartes. The foundation of the Inquisition remains shrouded in mystery and is still a much debated subject amongst Imperial scholars. Though it is widely known across the galaxy that the Inquisition exists, its deeds are all but impossible to trace. Records are sealed, restricted, or simply destroyed. Witnesses are silenced, suffer telepathic mind wipe, or are slain out of hand. Yet the signs are there for those who know how to look for them. Many Imperial scholars believe that the Inquisition played a pivotal role in such momentous events as the Second Founding, the Beheading, and the fall of Nova Terra. There are gaps in official records that indicate whole branches of the Adeptus Terra have been put to the sword in the past, and who but the Inquisition have the authority to do such a thing, let alone disguise the act thereafter? Most who seek the Inquisition's past go a lifetime without proof, and those that do uncover evidence have a tendency to disappear. Some attract an Inquisitor's attention, their skills deemed suitable for advancing the Inquisition's goals. Most simply perish, their lifeless bodies later discovered in situations so damning as to call their character into question. The Inquisition watch over the Imperium. They do not care to be watched in return. It is generally accepted that the Inquisition only solidified into its truly modern form sometime in the middle of the 32nd millennium after the formal birth of the imperial cult as the state religion of the Imperium, some 800 Terran years after the end of the Horus Heresy, although its essential components and apparatus, the black ships, the witch hunters of the Sisters of Silence, etc., were active in the Imperium during the Great Crusade before the Horus Heresy began. Newly uncovered sources indicate that the Inquisition had 12 key founders who were active before, during, and after the Great Crusade. As noted above, at the start of the heresy, the Emperor had ordered his regent, Malcador the Sigillite, to gather men and women of unswerving loyalty and devotion who might seek out the hidden foes of all mankind. Malcador ultimately presented 12 such individuals to the Emperor just before the start of the Siege of Terra, 4 of them mortal imperial administrators of an inquisitive nature, and 8 of them space marines drawn from his own Astartes special agents, the Knights Errant. The Knights Errant were loyalists. Malcador had been tasked with gathering from across the galaxy who were drawn from the remaining loyalist Astartes legions, or who had escaped their traitor legions after the massacre at Istvan III. These 8 Astartes would go on to become the first of what would later be known as the Grey Knights, the chamber militant of the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus, the Demon Hunters. The Inquisition was originally a unified organization with no separate divisions, wholly dedicated to fighting the corruption of chaos wherever it reared its head within imperial space. In the 32nd millennium, following the War of the Beast and the near destruction of Terra by the Orcs in service to the warlord known as the Beast, the Inquisition was formally divided into 2 major orders, or Ordos, the Ordo Malleus, which continued the Inquisition's original mission of combating the forces of chaos, and the newly formed Ordo Xenos, which dedicated itself to protecting humanity from assault by alien species. The Ordo Xenos received the Death Watch, an alliance of space marines drawn from many different chapters, also originally created to fight the Orcs as its chamber militant, while the Grey Knights continued to serve the Ordo Malleus. A third major Ordo, the Ordo Hereticus, was created within the Inquisition after the terrible events of the Age of Apostasy in the 36th millennium to prevent a future reign of blood and plague of unbelief. It was assigned the Orders Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas as its chamber militant and tasked with searching out all enemies of the God Emperor who existed within the Imperium's own political, religious, and economic structures, including rogue psychers, mutants, and other renegades. It is for this reason that the members of the Ordo Hereticus are often called witch hunters.
You cannot deny mankind the Emperor. He and the empire he has built are mankind's only chance of survival.
The ideal of restoring the Emperor to the Imperium in mortal form is at the heart of the Inquisition's formation. In the dark days that followed Horus's invasion of Terra and the Emperor's internment in the Golden Throne, the empire he had created was reeling in the aftermath of the Civil War and the Emperor's ascension. 4 individuals, trusted mortal servants of the Emperor during the building of his galactic empire, gathered together to discuss what was to happen. They were divided in opinion, with 2 believing that the fledgling Imperium could not survive without the Emperor to directly lead humanity, while the other 2 were adamant that the Emperor has ascended to a higher plane and that it was folly to interfere with the course of events as they had unfolded. The 2 resurrectionists, known only as Promius and Moriana, left Terra to begin their quest of bringing back the Emperor, while the 2 that remained acted quickly to establish themselves with the newly formed Senatorum Imperialis. Known to the Primarchs as loyal servants, these 2 began to lay the plans for the formation of an organization that would combat the efforts of the 2 dissidents as well as all other heretics who threatened the Imperium from without, within, and beyond the veil of reality. Thus were the seeds of the Inquisition itself sown. With the backing of the surviving loyalist Primarchs, including the new Imperial Regent and Lord Commander of the Imperium Robut Guilliman, the 2 first Inquisitors made themselves known to the High Lords of Terra and began to recruit like-minded individuals from amongst the adepts and warriors on Terra. Their dream of an organization dedicated to the protection of the Emperor would not be realized in their lifetimes, even extended as they were by arcane technologies, and the Inquisition, as it is seen today, did not fully come into existence until the 32nd millennium, by which time the Imperium itself and its many institutions were beginning to grow and spread across the galaxy anew. Yet Promius and Moriana were not idle during this time, and in the wake of the news of the Emperor's ascension, gathered together a following of their own, particularly amongst those cults and sects that were now appearing on many worlds claiming the deification of the Emperor. At some point, Moriana and Promius split, their goals still the same, but Moriana determined to use whatever means necessary to achieve her aim. Fearful that Moriana would unleash unspeakable powers of chaos to achieve her goal, Promius created a small army of dedicated followers to combat the menace he believed she posed. These 2 factions clashed many times until Promius's disciples prevailed, and Moriana disappeared, probably into the Eye of Terror. As the Inquisition grew and its presence was felt further and further from Terra, it came into contact with the Promeans. Several hundred standard years had passed since the fateful First Conclave, and even then the Inquisition, ever a confederacy of individuals rather than a single body, was pursuing several different agendas. The original intent, to prevent the reincarnation of the Emperor, had been diluted over the centuries, and when the Promeans were discovered fighting against an ill-specified chaos threat, they were brought back into the Imperial fold. Neither the Inquisitors that contacted the sect nor the Promeans themselves were aware of the irony of their cooperation, and thus the first Resurrectionist Inquisition faction was created. As the Inquisition possesses neither formal hierarchy nor leadership, each Inquisitor is free to pursue the mission of humanity's survival in the manner he or she believes most appropriate. Like-minded fellows gather together to investigate areas of mutual interest or concern as bounded by one of the many inquisitorial ordos. Each ordo waxes and wanes with the times, for many inquisitors move freely between them according to where they judge the need to lie. The greater the level of demonic activity, the larger the Ordo Malleus becomes. In times of internal heresy, the Ordo Hereticus grows to match the threat. An Ordo can lie fallow for standard years, existing only as a historical curio until its field of study becomes relevant once more. Such is the nature of the galaxy, however, that some perils, specifically those posed by the demon, the Xenos, and the heretic, are ever present. Accordingly, the Ordos dedicated to combating them, the Ordo Malleus, the Ordo Xenos, and the Ordo Hereticus, are considered Ordos Majoris, for their vigil is never-ending. Nevertheless, there are many scores of Ordos Minoris as well, lesser branches dedicated to more transient dangers to humanity. Association with one of the inquisitorial Ordos is not a matter of absolute allegiance, for they are no more structured than is the Inquisition itself. Nor does it preclude an inquisitor's involvement in matters pertaining to another Ordo. There is no formal demarcation, and inquisitors investigate and act where they wish. Indeed, many inquisitors would argue that to compartmentalize the foes of mankind would be a tragic error, for all too often the lines between disciplines are fine to the point of non-existence. Just as a plague of mutation might originate from an alien infestation, a blossoming population of psychers might prove to be the vanguard of an imminent demonic incursion. Membership of an Ordo is a statement of interest, a field of study. If an Inquisitor declares themselves a part of the Ordo Malleus, their fellows will know that their sphere of endeavor encompasses matters demonic. They need seek no approval to do so, for an Inquisitor has no superiors, save those they choose to acknowledge. There are sometimes elements of hierarchy to be found within an Ordo, albeit nebulous and highly informal ones. As an Inquisitor grows more accomplished and learned, they garner esteem among their peers, and by common consent is graced with a title such as Grand Master. These are marks of respect rather than unconditional authority. Other Inquisitors may defer to a colleague's experience and reputation, but they are by no means required to do so. Even within an Ordo, fields of endeavor seldom overlap completely. Each branch, after all, encompasses an almost infinite potential for study and investigation. Even so, Inquisitors sometimes band together into a loose association called a conclave. A conclave is assembled at the request of a respected Inquisitor who seeks to pool the skills, knowledge, and resources of their peers in order to oppose a threat too great for a single Inquisitor to face. An Orc-Wah, a demonic incursion on a massive scale, or a plague of heresy. Most commonly, a conclave will call upon only a single Ordo, but it is far from unheard of for a conclave to include several branches of the Inquisition if the situation requires it. Members of the conclave seldom take a martial lead. Such things are best left to the commander of whichever imperial military force the conclave has requisitioned. Nevertheless, the conclave invariably sends a representative to oversee any military actions and thus ensure that the focus of the mission is not lost in the heat of battle. If necessary, this emissary will seize command of the entire mission, but most Inquisitors find it preferable to remain in the shadows whilst the Emperor's armies go about their bloody work.
You have been told of the Inquisition, that shadowy organization which defends mankind and the Emperor from the perils of heresy, possession, alien dominance, and rebellion. You have been told the Inquisition are the ultimate defense against the phantoms of fear and terror which lurk in the darkness between the stars. You have been told the Inquisition are the bright saviors in an eclipse of evil, purest and most devoted warriors of the Emperor. You have been told the Inquisition is united in its cause to rid the galaxy of any threat, from without or within. Everything you have been told is a lie.
The Holy Orders of the Emperor's Inquisition, to give its formal title, is a massive organization that is, by its very nature, forced to interpret the divine will of the Emperor regardless of the particular Ordo an agent of the Inquisition might be a member of. Such interpretations vary within and without the Ordos Majoris, and this leads to certain divisions. Such divisions are referred to as factions, highly political in nature, and comprised of those individuals that share a common belief system regardless of the purpose and supposed desired methodology of the Inquisition, be it to combat the heretic, witch, demon, or alien. While such factions are multitudinous and subject to variation both broad and infinitesimal, there are certain popular strands of belief that outweigh and enjoy dominance over others. It is from these credos that the political lattice of the Inquisition is formed and defined. Discord between Ordos or between conclaves is extremely rare, for each has its own clearly defined areas of interest. However, the same cannot be said for inquisitors within a particular Ordo. The most frequent causes of disagreement center around the methods used to combat the Ordo's enemies. Some inquisitors believe that the enemy can only be fought with their own weapons, such as by employing sorcery against demons. For others, such compromises of the tenets of the Imperial Creed are anathema, inviting corruption of the Ordo's work for questionable gain. Such disagreements are often presented as a conflict between radical and Puritan philosophies, but the truth is much more complex. The distinction between the two positions is not absolute, but relative, formed solely around the observer's subjective opinions. Few inquisitors consider themselves either radical or Puritan, though they are swift to label others as such. A member of the Ordo Malleus might be quick to decry a colleague as radical for using forbidden chaos lore to bind a demon to their will, little recognizing that others of their Ordo consider them just as dangerous for daring to consult a tome of blasphemous lore, even though they have no intention of employing the knowledge contained within. For some members of the Ordo Xenos, even learning an alien language is considered dangerous, whilst others think nothing of hiring regiments of Xenos mercenaries to fight their wars. In the Inquisition, truth is often relative. The nature of the Inquisition means that there can be no appeal to a higher power when an inquisitor believes that one of their fellows has strayed irrevocably from the proper path. Perhaps if enough evidence can be gathered, it can be presented before a conclave and a judgment of excommunicate traitoris be sought. More commonly, an inquisitor is left to take matters into their own hands. Given the shaded distinctions between needless and necessary evils, few inquisitors willingly involve themselves in a quarrel between their fellows. Every disagreement has the prospect of sowing division throughout the Inquisition, and it is better for all if these matters can be kept at the level of a personal quarrel. Most of the time, such disagreements burn themselves out or are superseded by genuine threats, but sometimes they descend into outright conflict between the two inquisitors and their various acolytes and agents. The ideological struggle between radical and Puritan is not a battle between right and wrong, for such facile definitions seldom apply to an inquisitor's work. Radical methods can serve as the salvation for millions, just as the close-mindedness of Puritans can doom them. Alas, there is no way to see the outcome until it has occurred. An inquisitor can read from the tome of chaos sorcery called the Grimoire Malefact, and can use its knowledge to close a warp rift, but in so doing they risk opening their soul to chaos and becoming the very thing they most fear. Those of a Puritan mindset insist such risks are reckless and unnecessary, and would seek other methods to close the warp rift, even if the delay doomed a dozen worlds. In this case, the radical methodology would appear to be the correct one. But what if, by opening their mind to the warp, the reader of the grimoire Malefact is later possessed by a demon who wreaks more damage than the rift ever would have? It is little wonder that most inquisitors cleave to a single certainty of belief, for to doubt one's actions is to be cast adrift on a sea of possibility, frozen to inaction for fear of charting the wrong course.
Be silent. They are the eye that sleepeth not. Mention their name again, and they will appear, and when they do, death will be the least of your worries. We are all sinners here, even the pure.
The Inquisition is immensely powerful, and the only individual that is exempt from its scrutiny is the Emperor himself. If he has good cause, an Inquisitor may demand any service from any Imperial citizen, up to and including the High Lords of Terra. The Adeptus Custodes who guard the Emperor's palace and person are exempt from conscription, because their duty to the Emperor is clear and unchanging. When it comes to the Adeptus Astartes, Inquisitors often show some discretion, as Space Marine chapters are often willing to come to blood over any infringement on their Emperor-granted autonomy. However, not even the Adeptus Astartes are immune from the Inquisition's scrutiny and justice, and entire worlds have been destroyed in order to cleanse them if they were deemed traitorous. Inquisitors also have absolute power to judge and execute supposed heretics, mutants, unsanctioned or rogue psychers and the like, with no appeal save the intervention of another Inquisitor. Practically all possible verdicts are death sentences, although the means by which they are achieved differ. Traitors, the worst grade of offenders, are considered irredeemable and will be quickly executed. Heretics may be redeemed, often after considerable amounts of torture, and may receive absolution through death in service to the Imperium. This service may consist of archoflagellation, conscription into Imperial armies, becoming the operator of one of the Adeptus Ministerum's penitent engines, or, in the case of penitent psychers, being sent to Holy Terra to become new psychic fuel for the Golden Throne and the Astronomicon. Certain traitors deemed useful to the Inquisition may in extremely rare cases be mind-scrubbed, their old memories and identity erased and replaced with one loyal to the Inquisition. If it is beyond their means to track down and kill a particular individual or organization, an Inquisitor can simply declare the offending entity excommunicate traitoris, stripping them of whatever rights they may have had, and as such marking them as a target fit for extermination by any and all loyal servants of the Emperor. If the Inquisitor deems it necessary, he or she can attach an official stigma to a dangerous heretic, traitor, or alien species. Each of the major Ordos has a different official stigma which pertains to their primary enemies. These stigmata include the Extremis Diabolis for the Ordo Malleus, the Xenos Horrificus for the Ordo Xenos, and the Hereticus Abominii for the Ordo Hereticus. The Inquisition will also use its delegated power from the High Lords of Terra to declare tainted Space Marine chapters or other renegade Imperial military units or individuals excommunicate traitoris. The chapter or other unit will then usually be hunted down by the Grey Knights or the Sisters of Battle, usually resulting in the chapter fleeing to the Eye of Terror or the Maelstrom, if it has not already done so. The Soul Drinkers chapter was an exception, as they still believed themselves to be loyal servants of the Emperor, and continued to defend the Imperium until their destruction, even though they were no longer part of it. Young psychers who have not worked against the Imperium or used their powers much will usually be repeatedly tested, and if they are young, strong, and pious enough, may be taken in by the black ships of the Inquisition to become a sanctioned psyker, or even an Inquisitor if their abilities are strong enough. The requirements are strict, and many will be found wanting. Those that fail the Inquisition's tests will either be executed or used to power the vast psychic beacon of the Astronomicon, their lives sacrificed for the ultimate good of mankind, to sustain the golden throne which keeps the Emperor alive. If a world is the subject of extreme corruption by chaos or a Xenos infestation like that of a Genestealer cult, an Inquisitor may call down the verdict of Exterminatus, destroying all ecosystems on the planet and rendering the world completely lifeless. Many question the necessity of such acts, but the Inquisition feels fully justified in performing them. They feel that it is better for countless servants of the Emperor to be sacrificed than to let a single heretic escape their wrath to endanger even more lives. Typically, though, such an act is reserved for only the most extreme cases, such as a massive outbreak of chaos activity that threatens to corrupt other worlds or unchecked infiltration by Genestealer cults that precede or can cause a Tyranid invasion that will consume an entire sector. An Inquisitor has the power to declare an individual, or sometimes an organization or planet, as excommunicate traitoris. This declaration excommunicates the accused from the human race and is an indication to other Inquisitors and Adepta that the excommunicate party should be hunted down and killed for the good of the Imperium. Inquisitorial Conclaves are often the venue for declaring excommunications, and, in extreme circumstances, even a fellow Inquisitor can be so branded. Excommunication is never done lightly, but is a principal weapon of the Inquisition, and one of the ways its authority can be used to protect the Imperium.
These daemons, they hate us with a malevolence and intensity beyond words. It is their nature, their purpose to worm their way through the skin of reality and unleash horror upon our realm. Yet just as they are but puppets of their dark masters, so they can also act as puppeteers. They take the minds and souls of potent psychers, brave warriors, cunning generals, and devoted healers, and they twist all that might benefit humanity. Their poison spreads until the Imperium's greatest champions become instead its most terrible foes. Chaos peers into the collective human soul and uses what it finds to turn us against ourselves. That, acolyte, is why it is the greatest danger we face.
To protect its citizens from the insidious temptations of chaos, the Imperium of Man long did its best to hide the existence of the Chaos Gods, demons, and the Chaos Space Marines from public knowledge. Only certain Space Marines, sanctioned psychers, and the members of the Inquisition were permitted to know the Imperium's darkest secret. It was long Inquisitorial policy to mind-wipe even members of the Adeptus Astartes, including entire chapters in some cases, after exposure to the demonic. All others are either put to death after exposure to the reality of chaos to protect the Imperium from their possible corruption, or if they have been a valuable servant to the Imperium, they are allowed to live, but required to undergo memory modification, or even, in extreme cases, a mind wipe. This is a policy that has been in place since before the Emperor of Mankind was interred within the Golden Throne, when only he and his Primarchs knew that the warp contained intelligent entities capable of possessing individuals in real space. But even the Emperor did not reveal to his Primarchs during the Great Crusade the full truth that the warp was not just a seething cauldron of psychic energies inhabited by entities similar to Xenos, but was actually populated by malign intelligences akin to the supernatural beings of ancient human myth and superstition. He chose not to explain that the Empyrean was dominated by the ruinous powers and their demonic servants, for fear that this knowledge alone would lead too many of the Primarchs to take actions that would lead to their corruption. To fight a demon army is to fight a twisting tornado of unreason and despair that forever changes those who must confront its horror. As such, the Imperium believes that it cannot allow the knowledge that such foes actually exist to spread, since even the simple knowledge of chaos's existence may mark the start of an individual's fall to damnation. The human survivors of conflicts with the demonic were invariably confronted by the agents of the Inquisition and mind-wiped, quarantined for life in forced labor camps, or even, in extreme cases, made the subjects of a worldwide Exterminatus event. Over the eons, the galaxy has witnessed warp-based catastrophes and demonic incursions beyond counting. Since the inception of the Inquisition after the Horus Heresy, even the fact that such a thing is possible is deemed too dangerous for the citizens of the Imperium to know, for such knowledge breeds heresy as surely as a fly-blown corpse breeds maggots. Because of this, the vast majority of knowledge concerning demonic incursions has been eradicated from extant imperial public records. What is known is recorded only in prescribed imperial texts and heretical Xeno scripts that the Inquisition has yet to destroy. However, in the wake of the opening of the Great Rift at the start of the era Indomitus, this policy of secrecy has been somewhat relaxed, at least for the Adeptus Astartes, due to necessity. Before the opening of the Great Rift, the vast majority of Astartes were expected to be as ignorant about the existence of demons as any other citizen of the Imperium. In truth, it was hard to find an Astartes who had not fought demons by the end of the 41st millennium. Yet the Inquisition in the time of ending was well known to mind-wipe entire chapters after certain incidents, though not every chapter was willing to submit. Some, like the Space Wolves, resisted any intrusion on their traditional autonomy forcefully. But in the era Indomitus, with the galaxy now riven in half by the birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum, demonic incursions are so common and space marine responses so necessary that suppressing the knowledge of the existence of demons among the Astartes has simply become pointless. The Inquisition does not have a formal organization and is, at the most fundamental level, dependent upon the authority and skill of the single Inquisitor and his team of acolytes and throne agents. Every Inquisitor embodies the whole Inquisition and is granted the same absolute power by virtue of the Inquisitorial mandate. As the word of an Inquisitor is absolute and beyond reproach, except by other Inquisitors, the Inquisition is self-policing. At one time, it was said that the Ordo Malleus was responsible for policing the Inquisition. However, this idea seems to have been abandoned, and there are now those within each of the Ordos who focus their time in purging the Inquisition of rogue elements. The Ordo Hereticus is particularly noted for having members who keep a close eye on fellow members of the Inquisition. Despite the lack of a formal organizational structure, there are many types of inquisitorial groupings that an Inquisitor may belong to. However, membership within these is not mandatory. For example, an Inquisitor may choose not to join an Ordo. However, by not doing so, he will be unable to access their resources. Similarly, an Inquisitor is expected to announce his presence to the head of the Inquisitorial Conclave, overseeing the sector or region of the galaxy in which he operates. However, many Inquisitors prefer to work in secret. The solitary nature of an Inquisitor's work means that after leaving the company of their tutor, they might never meet another Inquisitor. This is not that uncommon, and in distant parts of the galaxy where the Imperium is spread thin, there are small offshoots of the Inquisition that have had no contact with Terra for years, centuries, or even millennia. It is in these splinter groups that new philosophies may be born, or older factions maintained, even though the greater Inquisition may have disregarded them. Dealing with the myriad threats that perhaps no other Inquisitor has encountered before, these isolated Inquisitors and cells might be viewed as dangerous or beneficial, and in the past have proven to be both. Over the generations, as with the Inquisition across the galaxy, the mission and purpose of Inquisitors may be perverted, either deliberately or simply through the progression of knowledge from individual to individual. There have been several occurrences when the Inquisition has openly conflicted with these groups, both sides ignorant of the true nature of their adversaries. Such wars do not usually end well, and so those who are most prominent in the Inquisition make great efforts to maintain contact with as many Inquisitors as possible to avoid such confrontations. Though some Inquisitors may endure a lonely vigil against the darkness that surrounds humanity, most will at some point meet other Inquisitors, either during the course of their duties or at a specially convened conclave. Conclaves are formal gatherings of 2 or more Inquisitors and are convened for a variety of reasons, which shall be discussed later. Most conclaves are called to discuss a single matter and will last a few solar days at most and be attended by no more than a handful of Inquisitors. Some, known in some records as high conclaves, can last for several solar weeks and cover a multitude of related topics. The attendance for high conclaves may number several dozen inquisitors depending on the extent of the topic or topics being conferred upon. Any inquisitor can, in theory at least, convene a conclave, although only an Inquisitor Lord will have the authority to call a high conclave. In practice, it is the more experienced and connected inquisitors that have the means and communication resources to gather such a group. Most conclaves will fall into one of two areas: inquisitorial remit or factional agenda. Those convened under the inquisitorial remit may include inquisitors from different factions, and high conclaves fall exclusively within this category. Such a gathering of inquisitors from their activities can only be necessitated by an urgent or important reason. On such occasions, the varying viewpoints proffered by inquisitors with differing outlooks is not only desirable, but almost essential if a proper consensus for action is to be agreed. Factional conclaves, on the other hand, will be called to discuss matters that fall within the beliefs of the faction members, and may have little pertinence or interest to inquisitors outside the faction. The Thorians, for example, may well convene every few standard years to share information about possible divine vessels, new theories purporting to any of the multiple facets of Thorianism, or to share new knowledge. It is for the flow of information that the majority of conclaves are gathered, to warn others of a new threat, to discuss recent events, to pass on news of success or failure. This information sharing will be followed by debate as the inquisitors decide upon a course of action that they will each take. Consensus is not essential, as inquisitors know full well that different approaches to the same problems will garner different results. However, being aware of the activities of other inquisitors around a certain area or confronting a particular threat can avoid unfortunate confusion and even confrontation later. A conclave is gathered by one of two means, either through open invitation to any inquisitors to attend, or by more selective invite. The first is the accepted course of action if a serious threat arises or is discovered, requiring that all inquisitors in the neighboring sectors be aware of it and, as is sometimes necessary, abandon their current missions to concentrate on this new menace. The second is more likely if the inquisitor calling the conclave knows of others that will bring particular skills or knowledge to the meeting, and is perhaps after guidance or further information. Given the nature of communication and travel in the Imperium, gathering together even half a dozen specific individuals in a single place at a certain time requires that most conclaves are restricted in their sphere of influence to a few hundred light years and must be planned in advance. High conclaves, those that deal with the most grave matters brought to the attention of the Inquisition, can be convened on smaller timescales if required, as astropaths send out urgent missives to inquisitors across a wider area. High conclaves are sometimes an ongoing affair that may see several dozen inquisitors answer the call all told, though perhaps less than half of them will be present on any given day as they arrive or depart as the tides of the warp allow. With the exception of the high conclaves, which must be held on one of the Inquisition fortress worlds placed strategically across the Imperium, conclaves can be convened just about anywhere. Secrecy necessitates that they be conducted somewhere that is secure and more experienced. Inquisitors may well retain or acquire estates, libraries, or bases where such conclaves can be held. One of the most dire reasons for a conclave to be convened is for the adjudication between two inquisitors. An inquisitor is above any judge but his peers, and thus it is required that for an inquisitor to be brought to trial, a fellow inquisitor must act as prosecutor. In these situations, an Inquisitor Lord will convene the conclave, often with the accused in absentia, and a panel of 3 or more inquisitors will hear the case to be answered. Such a conclave can find an inquisitor negligent, incompetent, or worse. The greatest sentence handed down by these conclaves is the declaration of Excommunicate Traitoris. The inquisitor is found to be a heretic and is to be hunted down at all costs. It has been known for inquisitors to declare another inquisitor traitor without recourse to a conclave, as may be necessary to prevent a deviant from escaping or when physical conflict is imminent. In such cases, a conclave of inquiry will be held after the events have unfolded. Sometimes such conclaves do not occur within the lifetime of the accused or the accuser, and they must make their judgment based on whatever evidence remains. Given the flexible mission of the Inquisition and the individuals that make up its ranks, such trial conclaves are limited in the punishments they can mete out on the guilty. One cannot simply stop being an inquisitor, and so censures and other threats carry little weight. Most often, the guilty party may be subjected to further examination, in itself not a pleasant experience, and this is usually enough to provide an inquisitor with a new incentive to re-examine their priorities and agenda. Calixian Conclave. As with many others throughout the Imperium, the Calixian Conclave has a long and labyrinthine history. This ancient establishment has gathered many resources over the years, ranging from small safe houses on distant planets to mighty fortresses like the Tricorn Officio on the sector capital world of Scintilla. Troops, secret libraries, ancient pacts, and even entire merchant companies are in the control of the Conclave, though many would be hard-pressed to find any evidence of such a thing. There are also numerous hidden heresies and forbidden episodes buried within the annals of the Conclave. The symbol of the Calixian Conclave is a golden chalice. At inquisitorial gatherings, an ornate version of this chalice is often displayed upon a table, plinth, or other prominent position. Tradition holds that it should be filled only halfway with clear liquid. The mythology of the Conclave holds that this is either a draught from the well of knowledge or the waters of forgetfulness. The original charter in which this detail was recorded has been lost, and copies of the tattered manuscripts seem to contradict one another. Darker whispers from the more radical elements of the Conclave whisper that the symbolic cup is in fact the chalice of corruption, a warning to those who would taste the mysteries locked within the Calixis sector's apocalyptic fate. A cabal is a rare body instituted by a conclave and dedicated to investigating a particular matter. They form a specialist task force charged with the prosecution of a particular concern. Generally, they gather inquisitors from varied backgrounds and philosophies, all working together via their differing methods and focused on a single goal. Cabals are despised by many, who see them as secret societies or unnecessary inner factions within a particular conclave. However, they have been shown to be a highly effective tool. By combining and focusing the activities of varied inquisitors on a particular scheme, cabals have often achieved noteworthy successes. Tyrantine Cabal, the Tyrantine Cabal of Inquisitors within the Calixis sector, is an example of a large and comparatively close-knit cabal. The ominous threat of the much-prophesied Tyrant Star, a strange apparition that heralds great disaster, has forced Inquisitors to band together. Appearing as it does, seemingly at random throughout the sector, the Tyrantines have so far been unable to track or predict its wax and wane. Whenever events begin to herald the arrival of the Tyrant Star, mass riots, dreams of a black-wreathed sun, natural disasters, unprecedented psychic phenomena, and so on, nearby inquisitors and acolytes race to observe the appearance. The data they record is shared amongst the other members of the Cabal and is much debated upon. There is also another resource that an inquisitor can draw upon: other inquisitors. On occasion, an inquisitor may well encounter another of his organization or specifically request the aid of a comrade. These are temporary, short-lived affairs on the whole. However, repeated cooperation between inquisitors can become established, and over time a growing group of inquisitors will communicate regularly and assist each other. This is likely if the inquisitors share some common goals, and these cells, as they are known, tend to be factional in nature and therefore can be used not only to further the cause of the Inquisition as a whole, but also to fulfill the agenda of the inquisitors involved. Some cells may only last a few standard years, as the duties of the inquisitors take them apart to different worlds. The inquisitors may never meet again, though sometimes a cell will continue to communicate sporadically over many years and large distances. In time, a cell may contain a dozen or more inquisitors, occasionally working together and passing on information to one another. A cell will often be formed to confront a particular problem, a demonic manifestation, for example. When this sort of threat reoccurs, an Inquisitor may call upon his or her old cell to confront the new menace. In this way, a cell may lie dormant for standard years or even solar decades before the call is sent out and the Inquisitors gather. Given the secretive nature of the Inquisition, the way a cell operates is very much built upon keeping the members secure and to protect them from outside recognition. Many Inquisitors do not work openly, and simply identifying another Inquisitor can prove difficult. At some point, as suspicions are aroused, an Inquisitor will have to make the choice whether to declare himself, risking discovery by a potential foe, but also gaining a possible ally. If two covertly operating Inquisitors encounter each other, the manner of their meeting will determine their reaction. To ameliorate this state of affairs, all Inquisitors carry with them an Inquisitorial seal. This may be a pendant, signet ring, actual seal, or some other accoutrement, and is marked with a variation of the symbol of the Inquisition. This seal is proof positive that the Inquisitor carries with him the full authority of the Emperor. Should anyone doubt the veracity of a seal, they will normally contain other digitally encoded information that will prove the identity of the bearer, utilizing technologies seldom seen outside the forge worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Although traitors and other nefarious individuals have claimed inquisitorial status to further their own ends, such is the fervor with which the Inquisition hunts down these rogues, and the well-communicated manner of their agonizing deaths, that it is a brave man or woman who dares such a thing. The absolute trust and authority with which the Inquisition must operate cannot be threatened, and Inquisitors will go to any lengths to expose a fraud and bring them to justice. In addition to their Inquisitorial seal, an Inquisitor's clothing and personal effects may well contain all manner of subtle information about their philosophy, allegiances, and contacts. There is no set cipher to this iconography, for it has developed over 10,000 Terran years and contains many levels of hidden meanings. And indeed, some symbols will mean various things to different Inquisitors in different parts of the galaxy. This symbolism is not always a conscious effort on the part of the Inquisitor. By its secretive nature, much information passes between Inquisitors either in written form or by word of mouth. In time, certain artifacts have come to symbolize a variety of meanings, some of which are relevant only to particular factions or Ordos, others that are more widespread. The Thorians, for instance, make great use of the skull symbol as a representation of the Emperor in death. Skull buttons, cufflinks, tattoos, earrings, or other decoration may be worn as a sign of reverence, but is also recognizable in certain situations by other Thorians. However, it cannot be said that the skull is the emblem of the Thorians, for no such thing exists, and the skull is a popular symbol throughout the Imperium, imparting a variety of meanings depending on how and where it is rendered. In addition to the skull, the Thorians will often have other symbols about their person, such as a scroll clasped in a hand, supposedly the hand of Prometheus himself as he left the first conclave, and also a broken lock, the solving of the riddle of the divine vessel. Inquisitors are, of course, exceptionally observant, and will instantly pick up these and many other details upon meeting another individual. They will already know a little of the other Inquisitor and their purpose before a word is spoken. Cells will often take this one step further. Agents for one Inquisitor in a cell may not know who else their master is working with, and an Inquisitor will not necessarily know who are the agents of his allies and who are either bystanders or enemies. To overcome this, a cell will often agree on a symbol or set of symbols with which to identify themselves and those operating for them. This can be as subtle as a particular type of stitching used on the hem of robes and coats, or more open such as the wearing of a particular style of ring or brooch. By these means, Inquisitors can identify and cooperate with their allies without fear of betraying themselves or their comrades. Some cells, particularly those that are operating exceptionally covertly and perhaps investigating local imperial officials of power and means, will also adopt a peculiar form of language. All Inquisitors will learn various codes and battle tongues from their master or mistress while they are an interrogator, and there are several spoken by Inquisitors all across the Imperium in one form or another. However, It will also be one of the qualified Inquisitor's first tasks to modify or create a secret tongue of his own. Inquisitors are pragmatic for much of the time, and every Inquisitor is taught early on that their loyalty to the Master may one day have to be forgotten, and they will investigate their former mentor. In such situations, security cannot be compromised, and so there is the need for every Inquisitor and his or her warrior band to be able to communicate in a unique manner. The cell will, either through meeting one another or by use of intermediaries, agree upon a form for their code speak, corresponding to one of the basic language foundations used throughout the Inquisition. Some are utterly impenetrable to others reading or listening and appear to be nonsense. Others are hidden within everyday phrases and conversation with carefully placed code words to convey the true nature of the message. As with their visual appearance, an Inquisitor's use of different types of cipher can say a lot about what they believe and whom they learn their skills from. As mentioned earlier, a cell does not consist solely of Inquisitors, but also their agents. This varies from their immediate comrades that accompany them to distant contacts that provide other forms of support or information. When cooperating as part of a cell, an Inquisitor may pass on certain details of their informants and allies to the other members of the cell, though it is an unspoken tradition that where possible an Inquisitor only deals with his own aides and confidants unless absolutely necessary. Using the visual keys and code language, the Inquisitors will be able to make their loyalties known to this intermeshed network of accomplices and agents and thus utilize their services if required. For their part, the agents will have been told of others working with their master or mistress, but information is power, and so any one individual is unlikely to know who ultimately they are working for, and will instead only be aware of the cell through a layer of intermediaries and scant contact. They may not even know it is the Inquisition that is pulling the strings. It is not unusual for an Inquisitor, even when contacting his agents directly, to masquerade as a lesser functionary to protect his identity. All of this allows the cell to deal with the threat for which it was created. A cell will last as long as the particular problem or menace remains, and may last for several standard years. Cells are transitory creations and may contain Inquisitors who are only allied through common acquaintance and may never meet all of the other members of the cell. However, should they do so, they will know immediately they are in the presence of their co-conspirators. Given the diverse nature of the threats combated by the Inquisition, which pay no heed to time or space, a cell may not convene with each other for several years while its members pursue their own missions in accordance with the cell's goals. On the other hand, the cell may see concentrated, almost frenetic activity for several days or months, during which the situation is resolved. Cells formed over longer periods may well meet again when another threat arises, as an Inquisitor seeks out tried and tested companions to aid him. Others will disband, never to cross paths again, although the knowledge learned and the shared experience will be kept by the Inquisitors involved for the rest of their lives. It is through the organic ebb and flow of the cells that ideas, theories, and acquaintances can eventually pass from one end of the galaxy to the other over the span of standard years, decades, generations, and centuries. Philosophies that may well have fallen out of favor near Terra may only just be catching attention in the southern rim or the eastern fringe. The Inquisitors know full well the impossibility of maintaining any kind of structure across the great gulfs of space covered by the Imperium, unlike other Imperial organizations, and for the last 10,000 years, it is an approach that has, on the whole, been very successful. In all, it is important to remember that cells exist for a specific purpose, to combat a common threat identified by the Inquisitors within that cell. Inquisitors are free to leave cells or to invite new members to join the effort, and they are organized on an ad hoc basis. Broadly speaking, each Inquisitor controls a network of agents beholden to serve their needs and interests. In turn, each Inquisitor also has certain obligations to their Ordo, Conclave, or Conscience, which they must fulfill. Often experienced Inquisitors or ones in need of specific services depending on their Ordo or the current situation at hand will have retinues of henchmen that he has deemed most useful. These retinues can be made up of a variety of individuals, from chirurgeon medics to lobotomized gun servitors carrying massive heavy weapons. The full list of known Inquisitor henchmen is described below. Acolytes, Interrogator Explicator. An Inquisitor can take on apprentices and teach them everything he knows so that they too can someday become full Inquisitors like their master. Chirurgeons, Torturer/Excoriator/Sister Hospitaller, members of the Adeptus Sororitas orders, Hospitaller, or just those individuals trained in torture, interrogation, and punishment. They can aid an Inquisitor in interrogating prisoners or healing wounds done to the Inquisitor and his acolytes in battle. Familiars, Cherubim/Servo Skull/Cyber Eagle. By far the strangest of henchmen, Familiars boost the psychic prowess of Psyker Inquisitors and allow him greater initiative. NB. In Inquisitor game terms, these would normally be considered as part of a character's equipment, not as a member of the warband. Hierophant, Castigator Ecclesiarchy. Priest Exorcist. Fiery members of the Ecclesiarchy, they boost the faith of the demon hunters. They are in service to and chant exorcisms and prayers that can cause agony to nearby demons. Mystics, Astropath/Warpseer/Sanctioned Psyker. Sanctioned Psykers used by the Inquisition to detect the presence of demonic creatures. Penitent, Bound Psyker, Penitent Witch Pariah. When a witch hunter makes a heretic Psyker repent his sins, a notably rare event, he could become what could be called a psychic lightning rod, absorbing the psychic attacks of other heretic Psykers and protecting the Inquisitor and his retinue in battle. Sage, Auto-Savant/Lex Mechanic/Calculus Logi. Individuals whose mathematical skills are so keen that they can calculate firing angles and trajectories perfectly, increasing the chance for an Inquisitor's ranged weaponry to hit its mark. Warrior, Imperial Guard. Veteran/Combat Servitor/Gun Servitor/Crusader/Adeptus Arbites. Arbitrator, these individuals, or mindless automatons in the case of the servitors, act as bodyguards and combat support for Inquisitors and serve their master in direct physical combat against the minions of chaos. Untouchables. Inquisitors may also bring in an untouchable, a psychic blank who possesses the anti-psyker pariah gene, to counter detection from that of another psyker or a group of psykers. Normally, an untouchable does little more than serve as a tourist who follows the Inquisitor. Use of untouchables in the Inquisition was first introduced by Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn, who, after finding an untouchable, helped form a distaff because of their usefulness against the many powerful psykers the Inquisition encounters. This distaff was ultimately attacked and destroyed by the heretic Pontius Glaw, but untouchables have continued to be used in Inquisitorial Retinues after their underrated ability saved Inquisitor Eisenhorn many times. Some examples of untouchables prominent in the Warhammer 40,000 universe include Weiston Frauke of Gideon Ravenor's retinue and Jurgen, who was a part of the retinue of Commissar Chiaphas Kane. Especially helpful, competent, or attractive retainers may become permanent members of an Inquisitor's retinue as new acolytes, helping him bring light to the dark corners of the galaxy. Note that this list is not exhaustive, as many different kinds of individuals with many different personalities and jobs have been seen in the employ of Inquisitors in fiction. This allows for Inquisitorial Retinues and the Inquisitors themselves to be highly distinct models with different personalities, weapons, histories, and attitudes. The Inquisition does not have a formal hierarchy, and there is no system of ranks or command such as is found in the Imperial military or the Adeptus Terra. Authority within the Inquisition is governed by two factors: reputation and influence. Seniority is in itself no indicator of authority. However, most Inquisitors will take heed of the wisdom of an older and more experienced peer. There is one position amongst the Inquisition that carries with it more power and authority than any other: the Inquisitorial Representative to the Senatorum Imperialis. One of the High Lords of Terra, the Inquisitorial Representative, is nominated from amongst the Inquisitor Lords of the sectors surrounding Terra, and inquisitors that have filled this role are referred to as an Inquisitor Lord Terran. It is not unusual for several Inquisitor Lords Terran to share the role of Inquisitorial Representative at the same time. Though the attendance of the Representative is always appreciated, their position in the chambers of the Senatorum Imperialis is often empty, and their vote conferred by missive. Such are the demands of the Inquisition. An Inquisitorial Representative may fulfill their role only once in their life, or they may attend the Senatorum for several standard years. The requirements of service to the Inquisition may necessitate them leaving Terra to attend a high conclave, while others quickly tire of the bureaucracy and politics that the Senatorum is based upon and relinquish their position to return to more active roles out in the wider galaxy. To avoid unpleasant politicking on the part of the Representative, the maximum term that an Inquisitor Lord Terran can serve on the Senatorum is 5 standard years, after which they must stand down. It is rare that the Inquisitor Lords cannot agree on a candidate for the role, for it does carry little more honor than that of messenger. The Representative communicates the will of the Inquisition, not their own. However, it does come with a great deal of responsibility. While the Inquisition enjoys absolute authority, in reality the cooperation of the other High Lords is essential in maintaining this position. If a representative were to cross the Fabricator General of Mars, for instance, the starships and arms by which the Inquisition's power is maintained may be put at risk. Conversely, if the Inquisition feels that an organization is stinting in its dedication, pressure can be applied to the relevant High Lord, turning an organizational issue into one of personal confidence. In this respect, the representative is in an unparalleled position of leverage, for they have not attained this role by personal ambition or desire, and therefore risk no personal stake in their dealings with the other High Lords. They, on the other hand, will be only too aware of the subordinates that view their position with envy and ambition, and so must actively protect their power at each turn. The merest hint of the Inquisition's displeasure can be the catalyst for a High Lord being removed by those they represent. Those High Lords whose position is non-permanent, such as the leader of the Chartist Captains or the Lord Solar, are particularly vulnerable to this type of careful manipulation by the representative, for they risk not only their personal privilege, but also that of the organization they represent. Thus, the careful balance of power between the Inquisition and the rest of the Imperium is carefully preserved. As well as garnering support for the Inquisition's endeavors, the Inquisitorial Representative has 2 other main responsibilities. The first is to warn the Senatorum of threats significant enough to trouble their debates. The Inquisition operates in such a way that it is normally the first to become aware of emergent menaces to the Imperium, and has proven this with regards to the Necron Awakening, the arrival of the Tyranid hive fleets, the advent of a Hrud migration, and during many other momentous events. Thus, the Inquisition serves as the High Lord's eyes and ears across the galaxy, enabling them to bypass the dreary and lengthy processes maintained by the Adeptus Terra when the need arises. Such warnings come not only for information, but are inevitably attended with a recommended course of action. The High Lords will debate this recommendation, usually modifying it in some form or other, and then begin turning the great wheels of the Imperium to implement their plans. There have been instances in the Imperium's past when the representative has been absent for many years, and in such times the Senatorum has become more rife with politics and infighting than is usual. The height of this was Lord Goga Van Dyer's claiming of the joint titles of Master of the Administratum and Ecclesiarch, heralding the Age of Apostasy, or the Assassin Wars of Vindication that followed shortly after the Reign of Blood. The Inquisition was unaware of these internal problems, faced as they were by increasing discoveries of an ancient alien civilization seeded through the halo stars and dead worlds at the edge of the galaxy. The Inquisition does not have formal organization, and therefore there is no system of ranks or command as there are in the Adeptus Terra or the military. Authority within the Inquisition is governed by 2 factors: reputation and influence. An Inquisitor may be willing to gainsay one of his fellows, but if confronted by several he will defer, Thus, an Inquisitor with experience and contacts can exert control over younger, less influential comrades. Seniority is in itself no true test of authority, but most Inquisitors will default to the wisdom of another that is older and more experienced. Despite this, there is a need for a higher tier of Inquisitor to help maintain the integrity of the Inquisition and to watch over the rest of the organization and the marshalling of resources. They are known as Lord Inquisitors, Inquisitor Lords, or High Inquisitors. Promotion to the ranks of the Inquisitor Lords is by invitation only, and is extended to those that have proven themselves numerous times, not only their courage and ability, but also their integrity and loyalty. To become an Inquisitor Lord, one must be nominated by an existing Lord and to have the nomination approved by 2 others. Quite often this is a formality, as the word of an Inquisitor Lord is sacrosanct to his fellows, and the chances of an Inquisitor actually being known personally by more than one Lord are exceptionally small. However, there is occasionally contention, and a conclave may have to be convened to discuss the matter, usually, but not always, with the nominee in attendance to answer inquiries as to their activities and beliefs. Being an Inquisitor Lord is a recognition rather than an absolute rank, and is more a formalization of a position enjoyed by the Inquisitor rather than an actual promotion. This is because an Inquisitor Lord has no real temporal dominion. They are not responsible for any given area of the galaxy nor specific individuals. Instead, it is reinforcement of the Inquisitor's authority, and in particular to power within the organization. The most obvious benefits are the ability to recognize the appointments of others to the ranks of Inquisitor, to convene high conclaves, and to requisition greater resources from the Inquisition's forces and agents. Like all Imperial organizations, the Inquisition is vast, covering the galaxy with untold numbers of agents. However, here the similarity ends, for the Inquisition is arranged in a way that is completely different to the galaxy-spanning bureaucracies of the Adeptus Terra. Its remit is open, its mandate simple, to protect the Emperor and mankind against any threat by whatever means are necessary. Such a mission requires the ultimate flexibility, and the scope of the threats ranged against the Inquisition vary from the individual mutant to system and sector-spanning conspiracies and alien domination. In this section, we will explore the ways by which Inquisitors fulfill their mandates and the resources at their disposal. The basic operational unit of the Inquisition is the Inquisitor. In an Imperium that groans under the weight of gargantuan organizations and an impossible interstellar bureaucracy, the Inquisition is unfettered by such considerations and is free to operate where and how it sees fit. With an open remit to combat threats to mankind, the Inquisition operates outside of the other Imperial organizations, though has absolute authority over them. In practice, the Inquisition must be more political than its mandate allows. Though their power derives from the Emperor himself, and even the High Lords of Terra are not above their scrutiny, the Inquisition must also rely on the other parts of the Imperium for resources. The Inquisition has tremendous amounts of power and has access to troops, weaponry, and archives beyond most other Imperial organizations, but it must still receive these from the Adeptus Astartes, the Astra Militarum, the Adeptus Mechanicus, and others. In essence, the Inquisition exists not as a force in its own right, but as a guiding hand that allows the Imperium to protect itself after a fashion. Much of its work is dedicated to observing threats to mankind and instigating an appropriate response. As well as the many Inquisitors, the Inquisition has millions, probably billions of other agents and operatives across the Imperium and beyond, watching for signs of mutation, alien aggression, treachery, and incompetence. Each and every Inquisitor embodies the whole Inquisition and wields the power of the entire organization. The word of an Inquisitor is absolute and beyond reproach, except by other Inquisitors. Thus, as well as protecting the Imperium, the Inquisition is also responsible for its own self-policing. It is a testament to the courage and diligence of the Inquisitors that it has maintained its position for 10,000 standard years, despite wars, pogroms, internecine conflict, and internal heresy. The men and women of the Inquisition are amongst the most vigorously tested, intensively trained, and motivated individuals from the whole of humanity, and they need to be. An Inquisitor needs more than simple physical skills and an armory that goes beyond mere weaponry. Their mind is their great strength, not only for intelligence, but also strength of will. In a galaxy ruled by religious dogma and orthodoxy, an Inquisitor must cast aside superstition and faith and operate outside the established view of the galaxy. To be an Inquisitor is to understand the forces that work against the Emperor and mankind in a way that no other individual in the Imperium can, not even those that sit on the Senatorum Imperialis. To be required to fight against 10,000 Terran years of received wisdom and established orthodoxy is no easy task, but if the Inquisition is to remain effective, then it is essential that its Inquisitors can see the galaxy through eyes untainted by doctrine or assumption, to avoid the monolithic, slow processes that are the curse of other imperial organizations. The Inquisition is organized on only the most fundamental level, the single Inquisitor. From their original conception, the Inquisitor can call upon whatever local resources were required to deal with the threat, with no need for recourse to the Adeptus Terra. This has stood true for 10,000 years, and throughout that period, the Inquisition has needed to maintain its position of absolute authority. To allow Inquisitors to operate as needed across the Imperium safely and without abuse of their immense and open-ended authority, the Inquisition gives each appointed Inquisitor an Inquisitorial seal. This is an Inquisitorial rosette, signet ring, or similar adornment bearing the Inquisitorial icon, and gives the bearer all the potent political powers of the Inquisition, including the authority to requisition Astra Militarum troops or Space Marines, call upon all three of the chambers militant of the Inquisition, and more besides, usually claimed by the authority of the immortal Emperor of mankind. The seal doubles as a decoder for encrypted imperial documents up to the highest levels of security clearance, and may have similar other perks depending upon the individual Inquisitor's record of accomplishment. The crime of forging an Inquisitorial seal carries some of the worst punishments the Inquisition can call down on transgressors, which is saying something. Occasionally, a matter will surface that requires more lengthy study and debate than a normal inquisitorial case. In such cases, Inquisitors may hold apotropaic studies. These studies usually gather between 2 or 3 Inquisitors. Larger meetings, known as apotropaic councils or conclaves, will gather at least 11 Inquisitors for debate and study of an important issue, or they may be called to ensure communication within the members of a faction or philosophical grouping of the Inquisition. Quite rarely, a so-called High Conclave or Apotropaic Congress may be convened, but only by an Inquisitor Lord. These will often gather dozens of Inquisitors for solar weeks of debate on many related topics. Usually, it is at conclaves and meetings of this sort that new Inquisitors will be appointed. It is also during such meetings that the Inquisition polices its own ranks, as no other organization in the Imperium has the authority to do so. Many threats that arise can be dealt with by the Inquisitor and their retinue without outside assistance. Cults in their infancy, renegade commanders, small-scale alien influence, and the other menaces that the Inquisition must battle every day are swiftly dealt with, either by the simple expedient of removing the individual at the center of the threat, or by elimination of the core of the enemy group. On occasion, a threat will be of such an extent that the Inquisitor must also call upon local resources, most notably the Adeptus Arbites and planetary warriors. They may require intra-system spacecraft to bring their foes to justice, or simply need more firepower against established sects or powerful individuals. In such circumstances, an Inquisitor can continue in one of 2 ways. They may openly reveal their presence to local military commanders and thus garner the resources they need. Alternatively, they may wish to keep their presence unknown. This is particularly true if corruption is believed to be more endemic amongst local forces. By passing on information through other channels, the Inquisitor is able to bring the problem to the attention of the Imperial Commander or other individuals and then assess their response. Failure to act appropriately to this information may well incur the wrath of the Inquisition, and a greater, more widespread purge will be required. Part of the nature of the Inquisition's work requires numerous undercover operations, depending on the individual Inquisitor, of course. Particularly dangerous or sensitive missions may require the Inquisitor and his crew of acolytes to operate without even the remit or knowledge of local planetary authorities. In some cases, the Inquisitor may fake the deaths of themselves and their acolytes in order to move their mission forward invisibly. At times like this, Inquisitors operate under a mandate known as Special Condition, which means that the Inquisitorial team, to all intents and purposes, no longer exists. The normal Inquisitorial symbol of office is replaced with a somewhat altered symbol during Special Condition missions that has a dagger-like point at the end and is colored a distinct blue shade, with a winged skull prominent near the top of the sigil. It is presented only when recruiting members to the team who can be trusted not to jeopardize the secrecy of the mission. Gregor Eisenhorn and Gideon Ravenor are two of the most famous Inquisitors to have gone on Special Condition. In some situations, local forces are not a viable option. This may be because they lack sufficient strength to deal with the threat, or perhaps because they are linked to the threat in some fashion. In such a scenario, the Inquisitor will need to draw on forces from further away. Such a situation can be difficult for the Inquisitor, as the Imperium is not swift to respond, and a threat that might be easily countered within solar weeks may grow progressively in strength before sufficient force can be brought to bear. It is the great expanse of the galaxy and the time delays involved in moving large bodies of troops, even relatively small distances, that provide the greatest obstacle to an Inquisitor in confronting a large threat to a world or star system. By the time suitable forces arrive, the problem may have grown beyond their capacity to deal with it. It is therefore in the role of instigators that Inquisitors must often operate. If a world has succumbed to alien domination, chaos influence, or some other major corruption, it is the duty of the Inquisitor to set the military wheels of the Imperium in motion and oversee their response. The admirals and colonels that are brought to the growing war zone may never even know that the Inquisition initiated the course of events that summoned them. There is also one area of an Inquisitor's remit that is fraught with peril, but is fundamental to their successful operation: their relationship with the Space Marine chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. Like the Inquisition itself, the Adeptus Astartes operate alongside the Imperium rather than as part of it. The Inquisition's power extends over the Space Marines, but the chapters themselves are fiercely independent and not welcoming of outside investigators. An Inquisitor that suspects a chapter of deviant behavior must tread carefully. Space Marines have been, historically, extended a lot more latitude than other Imperial forces concerning their organization and activities. However, the threat posed by a renegade chapter is such that they must be constantly monitored. The purity of their gene seed and the motives of their actions are regularly scrutinized for irregularities. The most traditional hardline Inquisitors have immense problems dealing with the Adeptus Astartes simply because they also operate outside the dogma and bureaucracy of the Imperium. What may seem heretical and self-serving on one level can also be viewed as essential to the Space Marines' power. The ability to act on their own, to fight where necessary, and to take whatever action they deem fit is intrinsic to the Space Marines' capability to respond quickly and efficiently to emerging threats or to proactively protect mankind. Unorthodoxy is easily confused with disloyalty, and there have been a few occasions when an overzealous Inquisitor has instigated a problem where none existed. The Space Marines are rightly justified and proud of their loyalty to the Emperor, but endeavor to remain aloof from the infighting and politics that plague the Imperium. They answer to none but their chapter masters and the Emperor himself, and to have their loyalty brought into question is a great offense. To have forces of the Imperium brought against them is, to the Space Marines, a betrayal of the bonds that exist between a chapter and the Imperium. It is therefore a prudent Inquisitor that does not rush in. In circumstances where a chapter is proven to be a threat, It is the most preferable course of action that other Adeptus Astartes are used to combat the threat. Not only is a Space Marine chapter a formidable fighting force that conventional troops may not be able to confront, but also allowing the Space Marines to deal with each other is invaluable. Space Marines all share a common bond with each other, and a chapter master will respond to information that threatens the honor of the Adeptus Astartes as a whole. For one chapter to turn renegade is a smear on the reputation and honor of all Space Marines. It is sometimes enough to be confronted by fellow Space Marines, rather than an agent of the Imperium, to make a chapter see the dangerous path it has begun to tread and to change its behavior. If such criticism were to come from another source, it is likely to prompt a harsh reaction, possibly even compounding the threat. On the other hand, if a situation has reached such a level as to become a genuine menace, the destruction of the chapter is sometimes the only course left open, such as the Soul Drinkers chapter. This is no small undertaking, and several other Space Marine chapters may become involved, either of their own volition or by request, as happened in the Fourth Quadrant Rebellion that led to the Badab War. It is clear then that wherever possible, it is best if the Inquisition can deal with a threat using its own resources, avoiding the dangerous entanglements that may result from involving other agencies and military forces. It is for this reason that the Inquisition maintains its own fighting formations, foremost amongst them being the kill teams of the Deathwatch Space Marines and the demon-hunting Grey Knights Space Marines. As with all aspects of the Inquisition, the matter of recruitment is not centralized, and the power to invest others into its ranks lies with the Inquisitors. Some do not recruit at all, spending their years in the pursuit of their enemies and dedicating themselves to their duties within their own lifetime. Others feel it is one of their burdens to bring about the next generation of Inquisitors to carry forward the battle that they must wage. Inquisitors are left to their own judgment in all matters, subject only to scrutiny by their peers, and the same applies to recruiting new Inquisitors. Many Inquisitors leave such matters to chance or perhaps fate, picking a suitable candidate or candidates from amongst those individuals whose paths they cross. Other Inquisitors are more rigorous in their pursuit of apprentices. They will spend a portion of their time seeking out suitable candidates, perhaps from amongst the ranks of other Imperial organizations. There are no consistent criteria of age or physical condition required to be suitable for investiture into the Inquisition. Proof of intelligence and loyalty are the key requisites, and often these aspects of a person's character cannot be properly judged until later in life. It may happen that extraordinary circumstances lead an Inquisitor to recruit a boy or girl whilst still in their teens, if they show exceptional ability. But this is not common practice. On the whole, Inquisitors will take note of individuals that are free-thinking, possessed of willpower and determination and unflinching principles. If they find a suitable person, they will become part of the Inquisitor's retinue, perhaps serving in a more minor capacity while the Inquisitor continues their evaluation. Those that prove their worth working with the Inquisitor will then be taken into their master's or mistress' greater confidence. Over several standard years, the apprentice will learn what they can of the Inquisitor's knowledge and in time will take on many duties. Some Inquisitors refer to these semi-qualified individuals as interrogators, though they are also known as novitiates, neophytes, or approbators. Such individuals may undertake missions on their own or control operations in concert with the Inquisitor, but they are still subordinate until their master or mistress fully invests them. It normally requires the consent of 3 Inquisitors or an Inquisitor Lord to pass on the full powers of an Inquisitor and grant an Inquisitorial seal, though there have been occasions when this has not been necessary, or the immediate situation has dictated that the apprentice take on full inquisitorial responsibilities immediately. This is likely if an Inquisitor is killed. Their apprentice will inherit their Inquisitorial seal and may fulfill the role of an Inquisitor subject to repeal by another Inquisitor. Interrogators may pass from one Inquisitor to another as fate and necessity dictates. It is in this period that the ideals of the Inquisitor are passed on and spread, and through this generational growth, the factions and institutions that make up the Inquisition are propagated across the centuries. As well as philosophy, the student will also learn what their tutor knows of the internal working of the Inquisition, or such facts as the Inquisitor feels is right and proper. It is an important tradition amongst Inquisitors that each of them earns the knowledge that is theirs, as well as the respect of their peers. Such wisdom cannot be freely given nor taken without effort, for it devalues the knowledge itself. As the saying goes, knowledge is power. Guard it well. Perhaps the most common shared traditions are those steeped in powerful symbolism. In many ways, man is a very simple creature who responds very well to certain images. The Inquisition knows this and is happy to exploit it to suit its own needs. Fire is traditionally associated with the Inquisition and its works. The image of the cleansing flame is a strong one, and acolytes are encouraged to employ it when they have need to strike fear. Wherever there is the white-hot excruciator, a witch pyre, or a promethium-dripping flamer, there too is the Inquisition. Other than the literal interpretation of fire as a weapon, there are other uses for such symbolism. Many Inquisitors consider their role to be that of the cleansing flame, there to burn away the rotting flesh of corruption. Some also hold that they are guardians of the Emperor's light, the holy flame of faith. Those that attend the black ships speak of fueling the mystical beacon of the Astronomicon, casting willing souls into the furnace of the Emperor's will. The hammer is also associated with the Inquisition. Many Inquisitors carry gorgeously bedecked war hammers with which to smite their foes. Like the Ecclesiarchy, many members of the Inquisition regard the hammer as a metaphor for piety, the force by which heresy and corruption are crushed. War hammers are common gifts for acolytes who have proven themselves especially adept at destroying cultists and heretics.